Guys, welcome to the new episode of the First Responder Playbook, which we are live tonight on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My guest is Gene Burke. Gene Burke is an author, speaker. He is a karate black belt and seasoned operations leader with over 30 years of experience guiding teams in diverse industries from corporate environments to family owned businesses. Growing up in Brooklyn, he navigated bullying and a challenging home life, which sparked his journey towards resilience and empathy. He found empowerment through martial arts and other physical outlets, gaining not just physical skills, but mental clarity, situational awareness, and the discipline to reclaim control. Gene, thanks for joining me tonight. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be on your show.
Yeah, Gene, so tell me a little bit about your upbringing and then, how did you end up getting into martial arts?
Yeah, so I grew up in Brooklyn, and I grew up in a broken home. My folks were divorced. Two great parents, but they just didn't live together. And while I was growing up in Brooklyn, I was physically really small as a child, and I had a really kind of weird skin condition on my face. So from early on, I dealt with a lot of bullying as I was growing up. And, it was challenging at home. My mom's great. My dad was great. But I couldn't go to my mom and talk about that stuff. So, and my father wasn't really around to talk to things about. So I had to kind of learn how to navigate that myself. And that started a whole journey. Even before I got into the martial arts, I began to realize through weightlifting and things like that, that physicality, can really have a positive impact on mindset and, how to deal with issues that are going on around you, because it kind of takes you out of yourself a little bit, because you have to focus on what's happening, in the moment, whether it's weightlifting, whatever sport it might be. It could be anything really. And that really kind of started my journey. And then what happened was when I was in high school, I found weightlifting, and I used to lift a lot, and I also had a growth spurt. So I could say that the bullying stopped in later high school, but it also weightlifting taught me a very important lesson. It taught me to set goals for myself despite what was going on around me, and to maintain a focus on those goals. And that helped me really across, my life experience in its entirety.
So I got to ask, growing up in Brooklyn, are you a baseball fan?
When I was younger, I was, and then as I got older, I started to move a little bit out of kind of team sports a little bit. I got very heavily involved just because of the martial arts background. I really got into watching the UFC, especially in the early days, and mixed martial arts and jujitsu and things like that. So, and I had some friends in karate who used to compete on a national level, in full contact karate tournaments. So I kind of moved away from team sports and into that.
Fair enough. I got to ask, I'm the random New York Mets fan in Oklahoma. So there's maybe like five of us, and I like my losers. So tell me, how did you decide to get into martial arts, and how did you pick karate?
So, interesting, through weightlifting, when I was in Brooklyn, and it's kind of odd because I was bullied as a child. So I actually I lifted a lot. So I got, for my height, I'm only like 6 feet, but I got, fairly big. And I began to do some bouncing in Brooklyn for some friends who owned some clubs. And I did that for and it wasn't my full-time job. I had a regular job, but I did that for about, 9, almost 10 years. And during that experience, I started to think, hey, maybe I should learn something a little more, technical, let's say. And, so I began to explore different arts, and I looked at a variety of different schools and arts. But what happened was, at the time, I had a weird work schedule, and I used to work later into the evening. And there were really very, very few schools that had early morning classes. And that's actually how I found, and I was always drawn to karate anyway, but that's how I found my first instructor. And I stayed with him for, even to today, even though we don't train too much anymore. He's on the West Coast, but, that started my journey. And then when I got there, I found a fantastic community. It was really a great community. And that kind of locked me into that, just really the camaraderie and the training and the focus and the discipline that you needed. That's how that journey started.
Yeah. So I mean, getting your black belt is such a big accomplishment. And forgive me, that's not my area of expertise. How long did that take? And, what all goes into getting that?
Yeah, so I didn't have a linear path. I just because of work and things like that. So I got my black belt probably about 9 years after I started training, because I had some breaks in between. Sometimes I just couldn't train because of work obligations and things like that. So it took me about 9 years to get my black belt. And then in the black belt process, at the time I was with World Oyama Karate, which is an offshoot of Kyokushin. And it was the belt test itself was, you had to do Kihon basics, a lot of that. You had to do some, obviously some kata, which are preset forms, and then there was a sparring element to it. And at the time I actually took the black belt, I think I just turned 40, so I was a little bit older. But again, that was a great experience because, and here's the funny thing, and it shows you, and this actually really began to really pique my interest in how the mind works. So I was really nervous before as many people are, but I was really, really nervous before the black belt test. But what's interesting about it was I wasn't worried about getting hurt, because, and it was a full contact style. I mean, sometimes you get hurt. I mean, in any martial art, anything you do, you get hurt in gardening for, you can do anything you're doing. But what really caught my interest was my fear of looking foolish, of embarrassing not just myself, but my instructor. And that was really, for me, that was eye-opening because I realized that the challenge that was going on wasn't outside, it was inside my mind. And I didn't know where that came from. So that really, actually, oddly enough, I went to college, and originally I wanted to be a psychologist, and then life takes you in different paths. And I wound up, having a lifelong career as a manager, operations manager. But I've always been interested in the mind, but that particular event and what surrounded that, and my going into the black belt test and actually experiencing the black belt test, and the anxiety that I felt that was all within my mind, really piqued an interest in how mindset can affect everything. Your mind can be your greatest friend or your greatest enemy.
It's funny you touch on that because when I first started trying to get in law enforcement, there was an agency that had a obstacle course, and I'll never forget the day we tested. It was one of those Oklahoma summers where it was 107 degrees outside, and I wasn't in terrible shape, but I wasn't in like training shape either.
Right.
But I went and tested, and of course, they did the inside portion during the daytime, and then during the afternoon when it's blazing hot's when they did the outside obstacle
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
But I got myself so worked up and so psyched up about doing it
Yeah.
that when I first started taking off running, because we had like I don't know, 50-yard sprint to start it out, that my legs just felt like jello because I was so amped up and
Hmm.
anxious to get it going. And it literally took me about halfway through the course just to get my legs underneath me to get it done. And I passed it, but I do enjoy the psychology of things because I mean I totally psyched myself out for something that wasn't the hardest test in the world, but I was just so worried about everything around me. I want to be a cop. It's so hot outside. I want to do good, get in the upper echelon of the testing that I psyched myself out. And then when I took off running, like I thought I was going to fall flat on my face because I couldn't feel my legs.
Yeah. It's really interesting you say that. And it really ties into how the mind and the body are so intimately connected. So, during the black belt test and, subsequent tests years later after that, I can remember, I used to train all the time, for this belt test. And I used to do rounds and rounds and rounds of sparring and bag work and stairs and running and everything. And I was in probably, if not the best shape of my life, even at 40, I was in really, really good shape. But I was so drained from the mental angst about testing and looking like a fool that it was draining. I mean, it was physically draining even before I got on the mat. And it just shows you how really powerful the mind can be. And if you don't learn how to control it, and, to this day, I mean, everyone has challenges with controlling their mindset. But, if you look at fighters, right? So here's one of the things and as a, in law enforcement, obviously the same thing. So, when I was bouncing and stuff like that, and even myself, guys I work with myself, we all had tics, right? So because when the adrenaline starts going, right, doesn't always mean you're afraid, but you should be afraid, right? Because violence is never a good thing. But everyone had tics. So one guy they might be stomping their foot, you know. One guy, their voice would crack. You know, my voice would crack when my tic in my body is when I get really when my adrenaline's pumping. You know, some guys would shake, some guys would hop a little bit. My voice would crack. So I never used to say much, right? Because you know you don't want to give an edge to someone. But what I'm saying is, you know, it shows you how even like if you look at pro athletes, they all have tics. They all have things that they do physically. And if you look at boxers, they'll be jumping around in the ring before because they're trying to burn off the adrenaline, and it helps them hide what they perceive as fear. And it's not fear. It is a little bit of fear, but the majority of it is adrenaline that's pumping through your body. And people take that as cowardice, and it's not. It's a physical reaction to fear or to a situation that's you know at the moment unknown. You don't know what the outcome is going to be, and so your body naturally produces a lot of adrenaline, and you have physical reactions to that, and it could take a wide variety of expressions in the body.
Absolutely. So tell me, how did you decide to go down getting involved in like leadership and leadership development? Was that just kind of a natural segue? You
No,
know?
yeah, no, not at all. So, you know, actually, as I said, I wanted to be a psychologist originally, and you know, life takes you in a different direction. So, I was young and I was looking for work, and this is actually literally how it started. I was in Brooklyn, and UPS was hiring, and back in the day, everyone wanted to work. If you didn't have, and I had a college degree, but I wanted to get a good paying job, so um, I saw they were posting for UPS, so I went in a suit. This is literally how it started. I went in a suit. There were probably 50, I don't know, 50 something guys online outside, and one of the supervisors who was there running the process, because what they would do is they would look at resume, even if people didn't have resumes, they would talk to people. It was kind of like a pre-interview type thing, and I was the only guy in the line with a suit. So the supervisor came up to me and said, "Hey, what's your background?" Then I told him, you know, I have a degree, blah, blah, blah. He goes, "Would you be interested in going to management?" I'm like, "Absolutely." I went back, I spoke to him. So UPS, I don't know how it is today, but back in the early 80s, everybody had to drive. So even before I became a supervisor, I had to actually be a UPS driver, which was a great experience because then you understand what the people, what the drivers are going through. But that's literally how I started my management career, and then that just led to one job to another. And it's been almost a 40-year span now of being in operations management. And over that time, I really learned my style on management over 40 years has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Can you kind of touch on that? How your leadership style has changed from when you first started to where you're at now?
yeah, sure. So, I would say, and I think it also goes to personality type. So like, I'm not particularly, I don't know, I'm not really particularly an aggressive person. Um, and some managers can be, and it comes out as aggression. It doesn't mean to be aggression, but they could come out pretty hard. So I think my approach was, I know it was much harder when I was younger, because especially when I first started, you want to make an impression, you want to make sure, people are following what you're asking them to do and so forth. And there wasn't a lot of psychology behind it back then. We were also living in a different world back then. Back then in the 80s and the 90s, um, there wasn't as much discussion between, let's say, hourly people and management. Management said you need to do this, and you did it. Like it wasn't back and forth too much. So it was a little different kind of environment back then. But over time, I began to realize, I got the best out of people when you really listen to them. I could tell you, like even today, like years ago when I first started, I mean, 40 years ago, I might have really quick chats with my guys, but wasn't an exploratory chat. I could tell you now today, like I have meetings all the time with the team that reports to me, and we have an open forum. And the only criteria in the meeting is, you can't get offended. So if someone in the group says, "Hey, we're not doing this right or that right," should be taken as a learning experience. And I can tell you that some of the best feedback I've gotten from people, who fall under my management umbrella are sometimes brand new people who have a fresh set of eyes that maybe you never thought of something before. And not, most of the time maybe they don't have a great idea, but you know what? They're heard. And I think that's important for people. So I think that that's been the evolution of my management style over from being harder as I was younger to being, kind of in the middle of the road. And now, my whole goal in management is, one, obviously to make sure my operation that I'm responsible for is running well, but also to help people who maybe want to develop and grow on the team, find out what their strengths and weaknesses are, and and work with them and make sure that you give them enough tools and support that they need to maybe get where they want to be. So my approach now is much softer, but everyone knows, you know, I expect them to be doing their job. But it's kind of weird. The environment that I try to have is, it's relaxed but intense at the same time. So you want to have your job done, but you shouldn't be at work miserable all day. And can I tell you a quick story?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I won't say the client or anything, but when I ran a region for a while for a company, and one of the things I had to go out of state, and I had set this particular site up a year before, and I hired most of the managers there, and I hired a lot of the staff. I mean, there were some changes in a year, but and about a year later, I had to go back out. We were doing some follow-up work out on the site, and I'll never forget this. And it just shows, and I'm not saying this to blow smoke about me. I'm just saying how management styles can absolutely impact teams, right? So I got there really early. The guys started really early, and we were talking, and a very large room, and most of the staff was there because we were prepping for the day, and very relaxed, very enjoyable conversation, and it was nice. It was nice to see everyone, and I was checking in with people. How you doing? And I'll never forget this. So behind me, the door opened, and it was like someone threw the air conditioning on high. Literally, the temperature in the room changed, and everybody clamped down. And what happened was the manager who wound up taking over the site that I didn't hire came into the room, and I could see it. It was just remarkable, the change in environment. And I'm not saying it was because of me. I'm just saying, I mean, that I had such a great, approach to people, but the mindset change, and there was actually a palpable, almost fear in the room. And later I went out to lunch with one of the supervisors, and I was like, what was that about? And then he told me what was going on there, and great. The guy was a great, listen, operationally, the manager took over, really knew his stuff. He was very professional. I don't want to knock him for that or anything like that, but he had a very hard style. And, sometimes I think when you do that in management, you don't, if if you're that hard, people will give you enough not to get fired. But they won't, in my opinion, they won't look for things to help grow your operation and make it better for you and for them.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So, how did you balance like your professional and personal life through your career? I mean, those are a lot of things people struggle with, and what were your best bets on that?
Yeah, so it's really hard to find, especially years ago. I used to work a lot, as many people do. I used to work a lot of hours, and it gets difficult managing kind of, they call it work-life balance now. We didn't call it that back then, but I think it's really important that, and sometimes I didn't handle it very well, right? Like I'd be working a lot and neglect other things, and vice versa. Sometimes I would be too much, excuse me, some things, and this happens to everybody, right? Life happens, and that can impact your job performance just because you have things going on outside. So I think it's really important to kind of find a middle ground and try as much as possible to separate work and work life and home life. I can tell you that I know people today that I work with, and people I've worked in the past with. Sometimes they take work home, and if they've had a bad day, and everyone does it. I mean, it's you have your spouse and your family, particularly your spouse you're talking to. If you're constantly coming home, and if you're having a bad day and you're bringing that home every day, that could ruin their day. So, I think it's really important that you try to find a balance and see if you can separate it a little bit. Sometimes you can't, but I think it's healthy for you mentally to be able to disengage. Like I could tell you, everyone in my office knows, because I don't like to work from emotion. If I'm making a decision, I don't like to work from emotion. And I think it's a bad practice in general. So everyone in my office knows that if I'm standing by my window, looking out the window, give me 5 minutes because I'm really ticked off about something. and they'll just walk away, and they'll come back 5 minutes later, and I'm fine. But because they know I don't want to react, whether it's really happy. Here's my thing, and I could be wrong on this, but I don't think it's a great idea to make really important decisions either when you're really, really happy or you're really, really mad. I think either way you can get clouded and sometimes not make the best choice. So, I try to approach that in my management style as well. And I hope that helps me in my personal life as well.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. For far too long, especially in the police world, we were always told to separate your personal and professional life, and I'm just gonna be honest, that's not really realistic.
Right.
Um, they're kind of joined at the hip, especially in something, to where a lot of times we're working shift work, crazy hours. Um, it's not realistic, but you
Right.
have to do the best you can to manage that. And I always tell new cops, hey, like find you a support group that's not within your work realm, because I love all my cop friends, and we're still buddies, but a lot of times we always want to talk about cop stuff, and
Hmm.
I there's just times I don't want to talk about cop stuff, and I just try to make sure I've got a separate group of people that they could care less about cop stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really, really good point, and I think it's really important to be able to separate that a little bit. If you're constantly engaged in the same conversations, and they can be positive or negative, but it kind of wires you over time. You develop kind of neural pathways, and if you're constantly talking about stressful things, and I had some friends who were cops, and I'll be honest, I used to be amazed at what they used to be able to deal with, and still be. I mean, I'm not trying to be funny here. I really mean it sincerely. Because we would talk about some things, and the fact that they were able to remain level-headed through some of the things they've had to experience, is challenging. And you need to have that outlet even within the group. But like you say, I think it's really, really important that you can step outside that a little bit and have conversations that are not related to anything dealing with what's causing you, whether it's work or whatever it might be, because it's very hard to disengage long term over that. And I don't think it's healthy. And again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I absolutely mean this. When people, I don't, and I think it's really, really important. I think especially for men in our society, if you're having challenges, if you're having emotional challenges, or you're feeling some issues, absolutely reach out for help. I think one of the weaknesses we have in Western society is, I mean, I was the way I was brought up, you didn't talk about it. If you were having a bad day, suck it up. You just don't talk about it. And while I think that can work for a while, I think it's really, really important that people reach out for help, because sometimes you need a third party that is not in your world, and maybe you just want to talk to, and maybe they don't even have an answer. They don't even have to have an answer for you. The fact that you're able to just express something and get it out, I think, can be helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I've tried to change that mindset with people I work with, and just say, hey, do you need a vent? You need to talk? Like, just let's get it out and don't let it build up, because it doesn't matter how well you self-regulate. Everybody's got a tipping point,
Absolutely.
and once that you hit that tipping point, it's really hard to come back from. And so, I agree with you wholeheartedly. So, how did you go down the route of deciding to write a book in the first place? But now you've got several books. Tell me about those.
Yeah, thank you. So actually, one of the books is it's actually the one that came out second to last, but I've been writing it for almost 10 years, and that's called Eyes Wide Open, and it's about the soft skills of self-defense. So many. There are wonderful, wonderful books out there on self-defense, and what this is kind of the book is literally. I mean, it's titled, Eyes Wide Open, because your life is worth defending. All the soft skills that maybe can help you avoid situations before they happen. I think we don't often talk about that, and I think humans are, particularly in Western society, sometimes we're overly polite. So you know, in the wild, if an animal has a bad instinct about something, if they feel something in their gut that danger is coming, they'll react to it. We kind of think it away. And sometimes that's not always the best thing to do. You need to listen to your gut. But that was the first book. And then, been involved in the martial arts so long, Striking Success. It's about how to utilize martial arts principles to help you in leadership. And what happened was literally, this may sound funny, but it's better now. But for years I've had really bad insomnia, and I can remember
I
one
know the
night.
feeling.
I'm sorry.
I know the feeling.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, literally. I mean, and I remember one night I was laying in bed. This is serious. I mean, I was laying in bed and the room's dark, and I know the ceiling's up there somewhere, and I'm looking at the ceiling, and I'm like, I might as well do something. I'm up anyway, and I already, I had a couple of books in mind. Eyes Wide Open was already kind of fleshed out. I've done some tweaks since then to it, but I said, hey, let me see if I could put something together, and that's how that journey started.
I love it. I love it. So, I want to touch on a topic that seems to be, in a lot of parents' mind these days, and you have some experience in that, and bullying and children. And do you have some practical tips to help, these children that are being bullied overcome those situations?
Yeah, it's so it's so difficult, and the world that I grew up in, bullying, and this may sound odd, but I feel almost I'm almost privileged in the fact that I was bullied back, you know, 40, 50 years ago. The environment has changed today. In the past, it was face to face. There was no online, social media, anything like that. So, one of the things I think is really important is one, if you can, talk to your parents. Your parents are typically your best support. Um, it's really hard you can't control other people's actions. Listen, the reality of it is there are mean people in the world. I mean, just it is what it is. And kids have been bullying other kids since the beginning of time. It just, for some reason, it seems to be wired into our species. But if you can, it's really important to. I literally just had this conversation a short while ago. Um, you know, my thing is for anyone who's bullied, and this may sound so corny, but I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. Typically, if someone who's bullying you has enough of their own issues, and they're lashing out, and unfortunately, you happen to be the target, right? But typically, those people are very unhappy themselves. They may have a horrible. I'm not excusing, please. I'm not excusing the bullying. I'm trying to maybe give some reasons why they're doing it. They could have a horrible home life. They could be a variety of reasons, and they're lashing out, and you happen to be the target of the day. But one of the things I think it's really important to realize is for kids, and if any younger folks are listening to this, I mean this sincerely. You are so unique, in all of time, in all of history, all across the universe. There will only be one you, and that's really, really special. And I think that's really important for when kids are being bullied. Get the help they can, but if you can, and I know it's so hard, don't take what they're saying to heart. Know that you have great worth, and that you're going to do great things, and it will pass. I can tell you from someone who was bullied. I mean, when I was in school, there were days, I would wake up and the first thought would be, oh, oh, I got to go to school. And that was for years. It passes. And what happens is from that, if you use that as a strength, you can gain great strength from that. I learned from that early on, and I lost it for a while. And then when I was a little bit older, someone else retaught me it. Someone I was working with retaught me it. Is that never let someone else control your never let anyone else control your inner life. So if someone's being mean to you, I know it's so hard. It really is, and it's difficult to say. And maybe this isn't helpful, but you really are very unique. Be proud of yourself. Love yourself. Be kind to yourself. And just realize that it's going to pass. It may not seem like it will, but it will pass.
I love that. I think that's awesome. So as we start to wrap up, where can people reach out to you at? Where can they get your books at? Um, all that stuff. So that way that we can spread your message.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So my books can be found on Amazon, Amazon.com. Just type in books by Gene Burke, and my books will pop up. I actually have two websites. My leadership website is www.ironroadleadership.com. It's all one word, ironroadleadership.com. And my more martial arts side of it is www.thirdmonkeypro.org. And there's contact information there, and there's different links to things, and I blog fairly regularly and things like that. So I appreciate that.
That's awesome. So I've been wrapping up my show with a new thing the past couple of weeks. If today was your last day on this earth, what is one message or one thing that you would tell the next generation to make this place a better place?
Wow, that is a great question. That's a great question. So, one, I think it's really important for people to be kind to themselves. I think we are very hard on ourselves individually. Maybe some people aren't, but most of the people I know are. And we will say things inside ourselves to ourselves that we would never say to our best friend or even an acquaintance. So be kind to yourself. And from that, understand that everyone, and including some people who might be bullying you, it may not seem like it at the time, but everyone is dealing with something that you have no idea about. And that everyone is dealing with a life challenge. And, if you look at, there are so many celebrities today, and they have miserable lives. They have everything in the world materially, but they have miserable lives. So I would say, one, be kind to yourself. And then through that extension, always remember that people are dealing with things that you have no idea about, and try to be kind when you can. But also, don't let people walk over you.
Absolutely. Gene, it's been my pleasure to have you tonight, and we will stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, sir. Hey, absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. You're always welcome back.
Thank you, my friend.